Our next panelist is Reverend Jacques Olivier, coming from France. Father Jacques Olivier is a priest at Notre-Dame de Bermond, which is very close to Domremy, where was born Saint Joan of Arc. So he's a priest there. And before this, he was in various parish ministries, especially in Lourdes. And in 2021, he published his thesis on Saint Joan of Arc and her prophetism on her political and ecclesial prophetism. So he's a specialist of Joan of Arc. And also, very interestingly, he is the postulator of the cause of the canonization of Empress Zita of Habsburg. So through this, he has a very deep knowledge of the Habsburg family. So his lecture today will be about these two saints and how they were involved in the war and what they do in the war they were involved in. So please, it's your turn.
Reverend Father, ladies and gentlemen, Jesus proclaims us on the mountain, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Yet many people recognized as saints by the Church have taken up arms, participated in wars, and even commanded armies in battle. At the end of the 100-year war, which can be seen at the twilight of Christendom in the West, St. Joan of Arc led the armies of France to victory against the Anglo-Burgundians, getting King Charles VII crowned in Reims. In modern time, during the First World War, Blessed Charles of Habsburg, Emperor of Austria and King of Hungary, fought until defeat while trying to prevent the ruin of a Christian empire. What insight does the conduct of these two saints tell us today with respect to our quest for justice and truth? How does it contribute for the theology of the saints? I suggest 3 points for your consideration. What is the legitimacy of the conflicts in which they were involved? What form of reconciliation and just peace did they look for? What was their personal Christian attitude in the conflict? Let me apply the classic theological criteria of the doctrine of just war in the context of the two situations, the 100-year war taken from the French side defending themselves from an English aggression, and the First World War, considered from the Austrian side, compelled to declare a war meant to preserve territorial integrity and sovereignty. This would lead me to the conclusion that these were two just wars. With all due respect for Professor Nicaros' evaluations he proposed us. Anyway, neither Joan nor Charles were the initiators of these wars, but each of them nevertheless led armies into battle and participated directly in these wars. A young peasant girl of 17, Joan of Arc was sent by God, by the King of Heaven, on a mission which included war. In the name of God, the men in arms will fight and God will give victory. As she testified before the beginning of her mission in front of the theologians of Poitiers during their preliminary investigation. At the specific and explicit request from her voices, her banner represented Christ the King, enthroned over the kingdom of France, represented by fleur-de-lis. Christ, the true King of heaven and earth, was the authority empowering Joan from April 1429 to May 1430. The young 29 years old Emperor Charles of Habsburg succeeded his uncle, Emperor Franz Joseph, and he inherited a war which he did not want. According to the prophetic words of Pope St. Pius X, reported by the Empress Zita, Charles is God's reward to Austria for the services it has rendered to the Church. At his father's beatification trial, Prince Otto, however, stated, the servant of God took command of the army himself and set to work seriously. He worked 18 hours a day, as he was responsible for both the domestic government and military operation. This duality and task was imposed on him by his political goals, which were to achieve peace as quickly as possible. Charles and Joan were thus led by divine providence to exercise a role as war leaders, without having chosen it, by obediently accepting the mission they had received from God. However, if the war in which they were involved was most likely just or not, they wanted above all to achieve a just peace. From the very beginning of her divine mission, St. Joan of Arc proposed a just peace. The terms of her letter, addressed to the English at the start of her campaign, are very clear. Joan the Maid is ready to make peace, if you will give her reason. If you give her reason, you may still come with her to where the French will perform the greatest deed ever done for Christendom. And reply is if you wish to make peace in the city of Orleans. Joan offers a true peace based on justice, following God's demand. Only a just peace leads to prosperity among nations and as a consequence favors the true common good, necessary for Christendom to flourish. This perspective is clearly manifested in Joan of Arc's letter to the Duke of Burgundy, whose content is focused on a just peace. High and feared Prince, Duke of Burgundy, Jean la Pucelle requests of you by the King of Heaven, my righteous and sovereign Lord, that the King of France and you make a firm and lasting peace. Forgive one another wholeheartedly, as loyal Christians should do. And if you wish to wage war, go against the Saracens. And I inform you on the behalf of the King of Heaven, my righteous and sovereign Lord, for your own good and for your honor and your lives, that you will not win any battle against the loyal French, and that all those who wage war against the said Holy Kingdom of France are waging war against King Jesus, King of Heaven and of the whole world, my righteous and sovereign Lord. Falsely accused during her trial of delightment in war and massacres, Joan specifies what a true peace should be: just, honest, and lasting. She condemns all wars between Christians and preaches forgiveness for mutual offenses, a forgiveness that transcends and repairs injustice and misfortunes resulting from war. She condemns false peace, based on lies, concealment, and ulterior political motives, which are source of new wars and injustice. And in particular, she opposes negotiated truces intended to deceive the adversary under the pretext of peace. On the reverse side of her banner, already mentioned, it's a dove, seen for peace. On Joan's banner, the usual branch is replaced by a small inner banner on which is written, by the King of Heaven. Christ himself appears as the giver of the only true peace in a new covenant. This peace of Christ is transmitted by the Holy Spirit according to the words of Jesus. The Paraclete, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, he will teach you all things and bring to your remembrance all that I have said to you. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives, do I give to you. Peace for people was also what Emperor Charles I of Austria sought when he ascended the throne in 1916. A devout Christian, he wanted to restore the common good of his empire across its various nations and peoples, and as a result immediately proposed a separate peace to the Entente nations, France, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Russia. a separate peace to limit the suffering of the people entrusted to him. Far from the idea of a total victory, of decisive gains, with a deep moral sense, he sought to negotiate peace diplomatically, even though he remained bound to war by his German ally and weakened by internal ethnic dissensions. Apart from his wife, the servant of God, Zita, who was a strong source of political, moral, and human advice, only Pope Benedict XV truly supported this effort to bring a just peace in Europe. His sister-in-law, Maria Antonia, testified to this. I was involved in the servant of God's efforts with my brothers Sixte and Xavier to offer peace to the Entente in 1916 and 1917. And I would like to testify to his heroic perseverance and seeking peace, a just and equitable peace, and how he remained loyal to his allies. So a day after the death of Emperor Franz Joseph on 22 November 1916, the servant of God issued his first manifesto in which he wrote, I want to do everything in my power to bring an end to the horrors and sufferings of this war as soon as possible. I want to restore the benefits of peace to my peoples. From the outset, he affirmed his desire to end the war and to do everything in his power to achieve this, and he kept his words. Charles proposed peace on fair terms that required territorial sacrifices from the Central Powers, the return of Alsace-Lorraine to France and the restoration of Belgium by Germany, but also the restoration of Serbia, expanded to include Albania, and the return of Constantinople to Russia. Nevertheless, in order to achieve a just peace, each party had to accept the terms loyally. Like Joan of Arc, who had been rejected by the Anglo-Burgundians, Charles was rejected by the Entente nations, with the few leaders who might have been in favor of it being sidelined by political maneuvering. Powerful forces were at work against a political solution based on Catholic faith and morality. During her husband's beatification trial, Queen Zita testified, the final decision by the Freemasons to liquidate the Austro-Hungarian monarchy was taken at the Eucharistic Congress in Vienna in 1912. A communication he received concerning a deliberation at the Grand Lodge of France, the meetings taking place in Bern, Geneva, Paris, and Rome, with German Freemasons also participating, revealed that as early as 1915, the end of the House of Habsburg and the detailed division of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy was a matter that has been decided and sworn to. In the end, far from an ironic pacifism, a just peace must therefore be desired by all the protagonists, which can compel souls of God, which can compel souls of goodwill and even the greatest saints to suffer the damage and injustice of war, in which the great virtue of charity that illuminated all things can nevertheless still be exercised. During his first apparition, St. Michael told John that there is a great pity in the kingdom of France. War, whether just or not, always causes great suffering. Faced with accusation from the clerics of Rouen who accused Joan of the sins of war, there is abundant evidence that Joan, who never shed blood herself, cannot be accused of hatred towards the English. On the contrary, she sympathized with the suffering of her friends and enemies, alike according to the testimonies gathered during her trial. Joan was very pious, and she had great pity for so many massacres. Indeed, once a Frenchman who was leading some English prisoners struck one of them on the head so hard that he left him for dead. Joan, seeing this, dismounted from her horse, made the Englishman confess, supporting his head and comforting him as best as she could. On the vigil of the Ascension of the Lord, many Englishmen were killed. Joan was greatly distressed. for she said that they had died without confession, and she pitied them greatly. She also asked to exhort all the men in arms to confess their sins. These testimonies show that Joan was nourished by the gospel, which asks us to love our enemies for the love of God, seeking the ultimate good for all. She radiated charity, she promoted natural peace based on supernatural reasons to encourage salvation. The Blessed Emperor Charles appears to have the same dispositions as Saint Joan of Arc. According to the testimonies of those too close to him, he prepared for his coronation as King of Hungary, like a minister of the altar preparing for his priesthood. It was with the total donation of his whole being to his God, to the service of the Church, to the good of his peoples, to lead them to their supernatural end. In the service of peoples entrusted to him, he knew that war must be waged under moral and just conditions, and that it was his duty to care for soldiers, the wounded, widows, and orphans, as well as to alleviate the suffering of civilians. The emperor regularly visited military hospitals to boost the morale of soldiers and emphasizes the importance of national and Christian solidarity. He provided financial and moral support to the families of soldiers who had fallen at the front. Together with his wife, Empress and Queen Zita, he organized food aid in times of famine and scarcity. He encouraged solidarity and generosity among citizens through campaigns to collect clothing for soldiers and civilians in areas devastated by war. Their son Otto testified to this in detail. The servant of God was hostile to the use of gas at the front. He was opposed to the bombing of open cities. In this, he was responding to the wishes of Holy Father. He gave formal orders that civilian population be spared and asked by the Holy Father to obtain the same protections from the Italian side. As for submarine warfare, my father never accepted it because he saw only disastrous effects for the civilian population and because it was contrary to international conventions. Neither the opposition that would have justified the means, nor the compromise proposals incompatible with his Catholic faith, nor the prospect for final defeat deterred Charles from authentic Christian charity in the midst of war that was atrocious in its duration and scope. Conclusion: Blessed Charles of Habsburg and Saint Joan of Arc are lights in darkness. Their truly just and deeply merciful actions in the wars they faced are examples for us all. They help us discern what is true, good, and just, particularly in the midst of armed conflict, whatever the cause, putting into practice Christ's words, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives, do I give to you." The lives of these saints are therefore a source of hope and theological teaching as they show us an authentic path to heaven, following Christ, King of heaven and earth, source of all justice and mercy. As Pope Leo XIV invites us in his recent message to the bishops of France, we can look to the saints as teachers to be listened to, models to imitate, and powerful supporters to pray to and invoke. With the help of the saint he has given you, God can renew the marvels he has accomplished in the past. Thank you.